Hi there, my name is Dwayne Habecker, and in this video, we're going to start a series of videos where we are really going to be talking about how to future-proof our instruction. Now, we don't know what the heck the future has in store for us, and the idea is how can we plan today in a way that is able to adapt to an uncertain future. Not only what we're supposed to teach, but how we're supposed to teach it. And so that's going to be what this whole series is going to be about. And we're going to start with this video is kind of an overview, and it's going to lead into what we're calling phase one, which is really talking about how do we prioritize our content. All right. Here's some important URLs that you can always pause the video and go to. This is an overview of what I'm about to talk about. And then this is really a curation of all the information that we've been gathering on how do we go into this idea of this uncertain world and how do we plan for it. So let's get started. And really, this video is largely going to start with the phase one, which is using lessons that we learned from the 2005 earthquake in Pakistan and the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. We can learn from those two prior experiences to figure out how we might future-proof our instruction today in this current COVID-19 infused pandemic. In a future video, we're going to talk about what does that remote lesson look like? How do we design a lesson that is able to respond to whatever the future has in store for us? And really, this video is going to talk about phase one, which is prioritizing the content in order to address all of the students' unfinished learning, plus how do we prioritize content for the fact that we're going to be teaching in a remote learning environment, which is slower than normal. So this is the purpose of today's video. But then we're going to then go into phase two, which is then, okay, now that we've prioritized the content, now how do we design a lesson that is able to be responsive to whatever that future gives us? And then we're going to do phase three, which is how do we take what we're supposed to teach and how we're supposed to teach it and put it into a nice organized learning management system with whatever your district or your community is using. Examples of learning management systems are things like Google Classroom, Seesaw, Schoology, Canvas. Those are learning management systems. And then ultimately, down the line, we're going to do phase four, where we help students and parents get themselves oriented to this brand new world. And lastly, phase five is where we talk about how do we monitor and maintain student engagement. We've done all of this work, and none of it is really going to matter if we can't monitor and maintain the students' engagement. How do we keep them coming back? But right now, this video is going to be just focusing on phase one. How do we prioritize the content in order to address all of the unfinished learning, plus the fact that this world in the remote learning is going to go slower than we would prefer. So let's get some research. Now, first off, we know about the summer slide. The summer slide has been a long-studied phenomenon that students return to school from an extended summer break, having retained less than what they used to know on the last day of school before summer break. So that's the summer slide. So we're going to use that information and we're going to apply it to what we're going to call the COVID slide, given the fact that it's an extended, longer break than a typical just summer break, right? And using the modeling from the NWEA research, this research document has talked about the fact that we're expecting incoming students this year, as the result of that COVID slide, that they're going to come in with only 70% of their learning gains from what they learned in ELA last year. And even more disheartening, only 50% of what they learned last year in mathematics. So this is compared to a typical school year. And what this means, this 50%, the fact that kids are coming in with only half of what they learned last year, that means they are going to be beginning the year nearly a full year behind what we would observe in normal conditions. This is insane. We also learned that from previous experiences in Hurricane Katrina, that really there's two ways that communities can respond to the fact that there's this huge COVID slide. Now, we learned from Hurricane Katrina that there's largely two ways that districts and schools can respond to this extended break, this shock in our system, the educational system. One common way is for districts to begin by reviewing all the lost learning from last year before beginning the current year's worth of content. But then another way that districts could respond is just begin this year with your current year's worth of content, pretending that there was no lost learning from last year, and then they address the inevitable lost learning as the need arises. All right, so you have these two typical responses from Hurricane Katrina. All right, and what we learned by studying these districts that chose one option versus the other option, that one option was definitely better than the other in terms of getting students back on track. Do you have an idea? I'm going to make you choose. All right. You ready? Here we go. It's that one, option 2. Option 2 was the better solution. So it is better, and this may be counterintuitive for a lot of us, but it is better for a district. It's better for us to begin this year immediately jumping into the current year's worth of content, rather than reviewing lost learning from last year. And as we're teaching this year, we'll just address the lost learning from last year in the moment as the need arises in the context of our current year content. All right. And so in another report, it kind of says essentially the same thing, that they studied lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina, that schools that emphasize skill recovery found that students scored poorly on state accountability tests and the students were slow to recapture their lost learning. In fact, they didn't recapture their lost learning. However, schools that emphasize grade level instruction actually saw their students improve student achievement. And they also noticed in an interesting thing that schools that utilize some sort of spiraling component that allowed students to kind of move in and out of their current content as well as going back to old content, kind of in a self-paced kind of a way, but students that allowed spiraling, either teacher-directed spiraling or student-directed spiraling, that those students had reported increased student engagement. Those schools reported an increase in student participation. And in California, because we're going to be focusing on how do we measure student engagement and attendance through engagement, this is going to be a really important fact this year. All right, so basically we take all of that information from Hurricane Katrina in Pakistan, and what we see with this Council of Great City Schools report, it's called the Addressing Unfinished Learning document, that there's really 6 key important principles for us to focus on. Number 1, stick to grade level content and instructional rigor. We're not going to dumb anything down. We're going to focus on grade level content and high instructional rigor. We're going to go in depth of instruction rather than pace, like trying to cover all the content. No, 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 no. We're going to focus on depth of instruction, which means, number 3, we're going to have to prioritize our content. We're not going to be able to cover everything. It's going to go slower than normal. So we're going to focus on prioritizing our content so that we can teach it deeply rather than just covering everything superficially. Number 4, we're going to try and include inclusion. We're going to do inclusion as much as possible. So we're going to use UDL, Universal Design for Learning, principles. We're going to infuse UDL principles into our lessons so that we can include as many learners as possible. And that's actually, we're going to go deeper into that in the next video. We're going to address the inevitable learning loss from last year, but we're going to do it through the context of instructing our current year's content. And we're really going to avoid a whole lot of standardized testing that looks back at lost learning, and rather we're going to use formative assessment that helps us look forward to tomorrow's lesson. All right. And then number 6, we're really going to make sure we have an attention to a lot of social and emotional learning lesson components so that we can help students see the commonalities during this crazy time rather than them see their differences. Because what we know with distance learning is distance learning tends to exacerbate the already existing inequalities. So what we need to specifically do is design lessons that really capitalize on the common experiences of all students rather than focusing on the differences. So those are the 6 big key principles that we're going to focus on. In a nutshell, if you needed to put that on a bumper sticker, that's basically, we're going to prioritize grade level content. We're going to teach with inclusion in mind. And then as needed, we're going to support students with their missing prerequisite skills. All right. So there is your bumper sticker. So what we're going to do this year. Essentially, the opportunity myth was this wonderful project that reported out that when students who started the year behind grade level, and that's going to be a lot of our students this year due to the COVID slide, that when students are given access to strong instruction and grade appropriate assignments, we're not going to do a bunch of review from last year. When students are given access to, strong instruction and grade level assignments, those students who formerly were behind grade level, they closed gaps by more than 7 months in a single year. We tend to use, at Merced County Office of Education, we use the core content hierarchy of needs to ensure rigor and high expectations for instruction and learning. All right, so how do we identify what we're supposed to teach? And that's what this whole video is about. This video is talking about the idea that we know we need to prioritize our content because we're not going to be able to, we're not supposed to review lost learning from last year. We're not going to be able to teach everything this year. So how do we identify our essential standards that we're really supposed to focus on? Well, we got to think about, does it extend learning from last year? Or does the content that we teach this year, does it lead? Is it a prerequisite into next year? We really need to make sure that what we teach deepens students' conceptual understanding rather than just talk about answer getting or reading, but not reading with comprehension. So what we really want to do is we want to make sure that what we teach this year deepens student conceptual understanding. And then really what we just, do the kids need to know it? Is it essential? All right, that's essentially what we're talking about. These 4 kind of litmus test kinds of questions that we're going to be asking ourselves. So here's what you're going to do. For your assignment, you are going to peruse these 4 guiding documents that you have access to in the eLearn course that you are currently watching. If you're a math teacher, you're going to look at this one. It's the grade level clusters. It's K-8 only. So if you're high school, you're out of luck. You don't need to look at this one. This is K-8 as well. It's the Student Achievement Partners Instructional Content. This document helps us understand what are our priority standards for K through 8. This is getting more into the high school as well. It's K through 12. It's this Addressing Unfinished Learning document that I've been citing a lot of. And then this one is a new one. It's from the Council of Chief State School Officers. It's the Restart and Recovery document. All of these are wonderful documents for you to use as influence to identify your essential standards that we're going to be talking about. In this document, this is the major focus document. You're going to look largely, if this is for math only, you're going to look at your required fluencies and your highlights of your major work, and you're going to look at these solid square standards to kind of begin the process of deciding what standards are your essential standards that you're going to be teaching this year versus what standards, while they're important, are going to get voted off the island. And that's what this document really is influential. It helps us identify the priority clusters and standards and domains that are, they're calling them priority standards, but these are the essential standards, not just essential. It's the few essential standards that we are going to teach. And then it helps us identify which standards are leftovers. And the starred ones, these asterisk ones, are major clusters that are going to receive less of a priority than in a typical year. And then this document also helps us address social and emotional needs. How do we incorporate social and emotional needs inside our current year content? In the Addressing Unfinished Learning document, the one from the Council of Great City Schools, it gives us these big bubbles. These orange bubbles are the things that K2 can focus on to support third grade. These orange bubbles. These blue and green bubbles are less of a priority. Similarly, the 3-5. What are the 6 orange bubbles that 3-5 can do to support 6th grade? And we're really talking, support growth into 6th grade. And then here are the 6 orange bubbles for what 6-8 can do to support learning that will happen in 9th grade. So here's your homework assignment. Here's your assignment. You are going to click on this link and it will open up. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to click it and it's going to open up a copy. And once you've opened that copy, you can delete any slides that are not you. So if you are a 4th grade teacher, you will delete all the slides that are not 4th grade. All right, so there's your slide right there. And you are going to identify the standards using those guiding documents that I shared. You're going to identify the front burner standards that you are going to teach this year. And you're going to identify the back burner standards. The standards that you are really only going to teach if the stars align and you're able to get there. In the olden days, we used to call these on the island and off the island standards. The standards that we are going to teach this year and the standards that we're not going to teach. But quite honestly, teachers were having a really hard time calling these off the island standards because it just felt so fatal. And so they preferred to call them front burner and back burner standards. Basically, the front burner standards are your essential standards that you're going to teach. The back burner standards are the standards that you're just unlikely to teach. And over the course of the next 2 years, a lot of these back burner standards will eventually get moved to the front burner standards. But it's going to take a couple of years for us to return to normal. All right. And you're going to do that for both math and ELA if you're a fourth grade teacher. If you're a specialist, you only teach one subject, then you're going to do that for whatever grades you do. This is just a placeholder. Feel free to custom design these slides to meet your unique needs. All right. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions in the forum discussions.